While the Trump administration argued for their right to add a citizenship question to the census inside the court,
what do we want? What do we want?
Protesters outside railed against the addition. The ACLU's Dale Ho challenged the government's intention behind including a question on citizenship.
If you add it, we're going to get fewer people responding to the census and a less accurate census. And let's not forget what the administration's purpose is here. They say they want to publish block by block counts of citizens and non-citizens. Well, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to be concerned that if that data is out there, it could pose a risk to you.
Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says he added the question to help enforce voting rights, but House Democrats challenged his intent at a hearing last month.
I have never intentionally misled Congress or intentionally said anything incorrect under oath.
Mr. Secretary,
done that.
Mr. Secretary, you lied to Congress, you misled the American people, and you are complicit in the Trump administration's intent to suppress the growing political power of the non-white population.
But why is the census important enough to involve all three branches of government? The U.S. Census is an attempt by the government to count every person living in the United States. Every 10 years, the Census Bureau gathers information like gender, age, and race.
We did it! Hey! What did you do? We helped Mommy fill out our census form. And we mailed it back. But why? Because everybody counts in the census form.
But why does the government collect this data? First, the Constitution says to.
One of the ways our Constitution preserves our rights is to require the government to conduct a census every 10 years.
The Founding Fathers decided the number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives is determined by the number of people in each state. The official count is used to draw voting districts at the national, state, and local level. But there's another important reason the U.S. conducts a census: money.
2,000,004, 2,000,005.
The U.S. Census isn't just a population count. It helps allocate federal, state, and local funds to your community.
The federal government decides how much funding or grants to give states, counties, and cities by looking at the detailed census data. That means money for updating schools, building new hospitals, repairing broken roads, and maintaining public utilities like water, sewage, and electricity.
You can answer Census 2000 and get what you need. Or you can leave it blank and get this. Nothing.
Private companies also make major decisions based on what the census says, like where to build grocery stores or new housing developments. But like any government agency, the Census Bureau needs funding to do its job. And it's not cheap. The last census in 2010 cost taxpayers $13 billion, with more than 500 field offices and 635,000 staffers nationwide. Census watchers look now to the Supreme Court for a quick resolution less than a year out from the next census. Today's arguments are just the latest step in this long-running controversy. And here to cover this from both angles are our regular Supreme Court analyst, Marcia Coyle of the National Law Journal, and Hansi Lo Wang. He's on the census beat for NPR. And welcome to both of you. You were both in the courtroom today. Hansi, I'm going to start with you. This really is the end of a long controversy, is it not?
Yes, this is a legal battle that officially started more than a year ago after Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who oversees the Census Bureau, announced that he approved adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census. And
remind us, Hansi, what is it that experts at the Census Bureau themselves say the meaning of adding this question would be to the census? What would the effect of it, what would the effect be in their view?
Census Bureau research suggests that it's highly likely that households with non-citizens, and that could include some citizens, would be very discouraged, scared of participating in the census if it were to include a citizenship question. This is a very sensitive question, especially in this current political climate of anti-immigrant rhetoric and also growing immigration enforcement.
And Marcia, so what was the legal argument that brought this case today before the Supreme Court?
Well, Judy, 3 federal courts have decided that Secretary Ross's decision violated federal law, specifically the Administrative Procedure Act, which really guides federal agencies in rulemaking, regulation making. They found that one judge in particular said the secretary had committed a veritable smorgasbord of federal law violations. So that case was appealed by the Trump administration to the Supreme Court. And we had the arguments today. And so tell us, in sum, what is it that the Commerce Department under Secretary Ross is saying, we need to do this? What is the argument they make? Well, Secretary Ross has given as the primary reason that the citizenship question is necessary for the Justice Department to enforce the Voting Rights Act. And during the questioning today, the questions sort of revealed almost very quickly the ideological divide on the court itself. On the liberal side of the bench, Justices Kagan and Sotomayor really pressed Trump administration lawyer Noel Francisco about the secretary's reasons for having the citizenship question. Justice Kagan pointed out that the secretary has the authority not to agree with the Census Bureau experts, but under federal law, he has to give reasons. And she said as she looked at the record and the evidence, she found no reasons. And Justice Sotomayor said it appeared to be he had a solution in search of a problem. And then on the other side of the bench, the more conservative side, you had Chief Justice Roberts saying to New York Solicitor General Barbara Underwood, who's a critic, one of the many critics. They had sued the government. He said, well, you know, the census asks a lot of questions. It asks, you know, your age, your sex, your marital status. Why not citizenship? And General Underwood responded, but for those questions, there is no evidence that they result in an undercount, and there's ample evidence that the citizenship question will result in an undercount. So go ahead. I was going to also add Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh also pressed her. They noted that the United Nations recommends that countries include a citizenship question, and that there are many English-speaking countries that have citizenship questions. And she said, while that information might be useful to some countries, those countries may not have our Constitution, which has as the enumeration clause the principal function of counting everyone. So Hansi Lo Wang, as somebody who's followed this issue, who follows the census as a story for as long as you have, what did you hear in the courtroom? Was there a new argument made? Was there some new ray of light shown on this issue today?
There really are no new arguments that I heard today. There are a lot of issues that are brought up in this case, and a lot of them are very technical. This is the heart of it is a lot about survey methodology and statistics, and some of the justices even remarked that, you know, wow, we're getting very technical during this oral argument. And so this issue is going to be, you know, it appears that this issue, the justices have already, a lot of them have already made up their minds based on the way they asked questions and the comments they made during this ruling, during this oral arguments, rather.
So, Marcia, the two of you, between you, you're making it sound as if it's kind of expected the way the justices are going to come down on this.
Well, it's always hard to say, Judy. I mean, they're very good at playing devil's advocate, and you don't know when they go back in their private conference room how they're going to hash things out. But it did look as though they were divided, and that division would generally favor the Trump administration here. But we'll have to wait and see. They are under some time pressure. The census has to be printed, I think, in July, and so the justices do need to reach a decision by the end of June in order to resolve this.
And Hansi, quickly, that's what I wanted to ask you. What does the Census Bureau do, whichever way this goes?
Well, it has 2 different versions of the 2020 census ready to be printed, and so it's waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision in order to tell the printer which one to start printing. And there's 1.5 billion pieces of mail, including paper forms, letters, postcards that need to be printed this summer in order to prepare it properly for the 2020 census to start next year.
A lot hanging over the Supreme Court on this one. Hansi Lo Wang of NPR, Marcia Coyle, thank you both.
Pleasure, Judy.